Hello there, you're following World News. I'm Yassine T, and here's what's making the headlines. On the 82nd day of the US Zionist war on Iran, President Donald Trump vowed to end the conflict, while Tehran warned it could expand the war if attacks continue and accused Washington of seeking a new escalation. In Lebanon, several people have been killed and others wounded in Zionist strikes in the south of the country as the occupation launches raids on towns in the southern region. Hezbollah says it carried out multiple operations against Israeli forces in different areas of southern Lebanon. During their summit in Beijing, the Russian and Chinese presidents signed a statement on comprehensive strategic coordination. Putin said Moscow and Beijing are actively cooperating in the energy sector, while Xi stressed the need to build a more just and equitable system of global governance. Details shortly. Welcome back to the details of our program. First up in our news, US President Donald Trump said Tuesday that Washington could bring the conflict with Iran to a swift end, while claiming Tehran was eager to reach an agreement with the United States. Speaking to lawmakers at the White House, Trump said Iranian officials desperately wanted to make a deal, adding that oil prices were expected to fall and that US stock markets were performing at record heights.
We're going to end that war very quickly. They want to make a deal so badly. They're tired of this. This should have happened for 47 years. Somebody should have done something about it. And it's going to happen, and it's going to happen fast. And you're going to see oil prices plummet. They're going to come down. There's so much oil out there. They're going to come plummeting down. But even with that, the stock market's at an all-time high.
President Donald Trump said the United States had severely weakened Iran's naval and air capabilities while reiterating that Washington would never allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. Speaking at the White House, Trump expressed hope that the issue could be resolved through diplomacy, saying he believed the United States could achieve its objectives with Iran in a very nice way.
2.5 months ago, we hit the best numbers that we've ever hit as a country. Jobs, the best. Everything was the best. Stock market, the highest. And I called my people in. I called them in. I said, congratulations, everybody, but we're going to have to make a little journey down to a place called Iran. We have to stop them. They have nuclear on their mind, and we're not going to let them have a nuclear weapon. And we've done a hell of a job. And I think we're going to be finished with that very quickly, and they won't have a nuclear weapon. And hopefully we're going to get it done in a very nice manner.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps warned Wednesday that any renewed US or Zionist attacks on Iran could expand the conflict beyond the Middle East. In a statement, the IRGC vowed to inflict severe damage on its adversaries through what it described as crushing strikes, adding that Iran had not yet used its full military capabilities in previous confrontations.
The American Zionist enemy, who has not learned from the repeated strategic defeats it has sustained by the Islamic Revolution, is once again opening its mouth to threaten us, even though they attacked us with the full force of two armies that are among the most expansive in the world in terms of equipment. But we did not use all the power of the Islamic Revolution against them. If aggression against Iran is repeated, the regional war that was promised will this time extend beyond the region, and our crushing blows will bring you to your knees in places you cannot imagine. We are men of war, and you will see our power on the battlefield, not in hollow statements and on virtual pages.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi warned that any return to a military confrontation would bring far more surprises. In a post on X, Araghchi praised the capabilities of Iran's armed forces, pointing to what he described as US congressional acknowledgement of the destruction of dozens of aircraft worth billions of dollars.
Months after initiation of war on Iran, U.S. Congress acknowledges loss of dozens of aircraft worth billions. Our powerful armed forces are confirmed as first to strike down a touted F-35. With lessons learned and knowledge we gained, return to war will feature many more surprises.
Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf said Wednesday that both overt and covert actions by what he called the enemy suggests preparations for a new round of conflict. In an audio message posted on Telegram, Galibaf said Iran's military had used the ceasefire period to rebuild and strengthen its capabilities. He also said opponents had miscalculated by believing economic pressure on citizens would weaken national unity.
The enemy's movements, both overt and clandestine, show that despite economic and political pressure, it has not abandoned its military objectives and is seeking to start a new war. Close monitoring of the situation in the United States reinforces the possibility that they still hope for the surrender of the Iranian nation.
Iran's state news agency, citing informed Pakistani diplomatic sources, reported that Pakistani Interior Minister Mohsen Naqvi traveled to Tehran for talks with Iranian officials. The report said the visit marks Naqvi's second trip to Iran in less than a week. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan said the kingdom welcomes US President Donald Trump's decision to give negotiations with Iran more time to reach an agreement. In a post on X on Wednesday, Prince Faisal said Saudi Arabia hopes Iran will seize the opportunity to avoid what he described as the serious consequences of escalation. US Vice President J.D. Vance sought to reassure Americans Tuesday that President Donald Trump's military campaign against Iran would not turn into what he called an endless war. Speaking at a White House press briefing, Vance defended the administration's policy amid growing speculation about a potential succession scenario, saying Washington still prefers a diplomatic settlement with Iran while retaining the option of renewed military action if talks fail. The US Senate vowed Tuesday on a measure aimed at limiting President Donald Trump's authority to launch military operations against Iran. According to media reports, the proposal passed by a 50-47 margin and seeks to restrict presidential war powers, requiring prior congressional authorization to continue or expand military action against Iran. Iranian state media, citing the naval branch of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, reported Wednesday that 26 vessels, including oil tankers, container ships and commercial vessels, crossed the Strait of Hormuz in the past 24 hours in coordination with Iran. The report added that transit through the strategic waterway is continuing after the required permits and coordination with Iranian authorities were obtained. Seven Lebanese people were killed and others injured Wednesday in Zionist fire targeting civilian areas in southern Lebanon. The Lebanese national news agency reported that Israeli airstrikes hit residential homes in the town of Deir al-Zahrani, killing 5 civilians and wounding others. It added that 2 additional people were killed in a separate strike near the Tabnin government hospital in southern Lebanon. Zionist aircraft carried out a series of airstrikes and artillery shelling on towns in southern Lebanon on Wednesday, causing injuries and significant material damage. The Lebanese national news agency reported that Israeli warplanes struck the town of Gandouriyah in the Bint Jbel district and carried out another raid in the area between Burj Rahal and Abbasiyeh in the Tyre district. It added that Zionist artillery also shelled the town of Siddiqin in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah said it targeted Zionist soldiers and vehicles with artillery shells near the town of Deir Syrian in southern Lebanon. In a statement, the group also said it struck a Merkava tank using a drone in the town of Taiba, claiming a direct hit. It added that Zionist forces were attempting to destroy resistance positions in the town of Hadatha in the Bint Jbeil district through airstrikes and artillery shelling. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said she had ordered the foreign minister to summon Israel's ambassador to Rome to request official explanations following the treatment of Italian activists aboard a Gaza-bound aid flotilla after the ship was intercepted. In a post on X, Meloni called on Zionist authorities to apologize for the treatment of those detained and what she described as a disregard for Italy's formal request. She added that her government would act at the highest institutional level to secure the immediate release of the Italian citizens involved. Chinese President Xi Jinping received Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday in Beijing ahead of a bilateral summit. According to footage broadcast by Russian media, the meeting comes less than a week after US President Donald Trump visited the Chinese capital. Xi and Putin shook hands outside the Great Hall of the People, where a military band played the national anthems of both countries before the two leaders greeted their delegations. Russia and China agreed on joint projects across several sectors aimed at strengthening their comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation, according to a joint statement signed by both presidents in Beijing and published by the Kremlin on Wednesday. The deal includes expanded cooperation in youth policy, education, civic and moral development for children and young people, entrepreneurship, volunteering, creative industries, and new media, as well as closer ties between regional youth agencies and non-profit organizations. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Moscow and Beijing are actively cooperating in the energy sector, adding that Russia remains a reliable energy supplier amid the ongoing crisis in the Middle East.
I would like to point out that Russia and China actively cooperate in the energy sector. Our country is one of the largest exporters of oil, natural gas, including liquefied gas, and coal to China. We are, of course, ready to continue to reliably ensure uninterrupted supplies of all these fuels to the rapidly growing Chinese market.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said Russia and China remain committed to independent and self-determined foreign policies, adding that both countries play an important role in promoting global stability.
The President of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping, and I exchanged views on pressing international issues. It resulted in the adoption of a joint declaration reaffirming the shared fundamental approaches of our countries. Most importantly, Russia and China are committed to independent and autonomous foreign policies, operate in close strategic partnership, and play an important stabilizing role on the global stage.
Chinese President Xi Jinping said during talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Beijing on Wednesday that resuming military operations in the Middle East would be inappropriate following US President Donald Trump's threats to resume strikes on Iran. According to the official Xinhua news agency, Xi said the Gulf region stands at crossroads between war and peace, stressing the urgent need for a full ceasefire. He added that restarting military action would be unwise and that continued negotiations are more important than ever. At a signing ceremony in Beijing, Chinese President Xi Jinping warned that the global order is facing growing uncertainty, stressing that unilateralism and hegemony pose serious risks. He said the world risks sliding back into the law of the jungle.
The world today is far from peaceful, with unilateralism and hegemonism posing profound dangers. The world faces the risk of regressing to the law of the jungle by proposal to build a community with a shared future for mankind. And the 4 global initiatives have received widespread support from the international community, including Russia.
Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday described their bilateral relationship as entering a new stage, agreeing to extend their friendship treaty and reaffirming their commitment to building a more balanced and equitable global order. Here's Nabil Khazini with the full report.
This is the latest chapter in a relationship both leaders now describe as entering a new stage. Numbers in diplomacy tell their own story. This is their 40 meetings in 13 years. A treaty of friendship extended once again, a partnership growing bigger for 16 consecutive years, and two powers drawing visibly closer as global tensions deepen. As Vladimir Putin arrived in the Chinese capital, the message was less about spectacle than about endurance. Two powers navigating a world increasingly shaped by conflict, sanctions, and shifting alliances. China has remained Russia's largest trading partner, with energy, technology, and strategic cooperation binding the two economies.
25 years on, since the signing of the Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation between China and Russia, bilateral cooperation has expanded significantly. We also hope to continue in this spirit, jointly advancing bilateral cooperation and working together on the international stage.
Inside the Great Hall of the People, discussions ranged from trade corridors to global security, but much of the language remained carefully chosen. References to a multipolar world, calls for fairness in international relations, opposition to external pressure.
China and Russia should fully implement the consensus reached between President Putin and me, seize historical opportunities, further consolidate the foundation of mutual trust, enrich the substance of cooperation, and broaden the path of friendship.
But in a world becoming increasingly fragmented, Beijing and Moscow once again offered the image both countries wanted to project globally: stability, partnership, and patience.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said Wednesday that last week's meeting between the leaders of the world's 2 largest economies may have helped ease tensions but failed to produce substantive progress. Speaking at a press conference in Tokyo, Guterres said the talks between the US and Chinese presidents in Beijing did not lead to significant breakthroughs, while stressing that Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Washington remains highly important. Algeria is increasingly positioning agriculture and food security at the center of its African economic strategy. At Sipsa Filaha 2026 in Algiers, officials, investors, and agricultural operators from across the continent are exploring new partnerships and are strengthening regional integration and boosting agro-industrial cooperation. Here's Marwa Blaiwar.
The 24th edition of the International Exhibition for Agriculture, Livestock and Agro-Industry Sipsa Filaha, now being held at the International Expo Hall in Algiers, is evolving beyond a traditional trade fair to become an economic and diplomatic platform that reflects Algeria's broader strategy to strengthen African food sovereignty. Through this approach, Algeria is seeking to expand direct economic exchange with neighboring countries, while leveraging its expanding agro-industrial capabilities. That trend was clearly reflected in the participation of Niger as a guest of honor of this year's edition, offering economic operators from both countries a new platform to explore investment opportunities, strengthen trade partnerships, and advance economic connectivity between North Africa and the Sahel region.
In the field of crop protection, we have also observed important expertise that can be transferred to and benefit Niger. Therefore, there are broad areas for exchange and cooperation in the sectors of agriculture and livestock farming. Today, Algeria possesses advanced technology in the field of livestock breeding, which is a sector of great interest to us and could constitute an additional area of cooperation between our two countries. This confirms that Niger and Algeria are destined to stand together, bound by ties of brotherhood and cooperation, making their partnership a model.
At the same time, Algeria's growing experience in agricultural investment is increasingly positioning the country as an emerging continental benchmark in food production and agro-industry. That momentum is particularly visible through Sonatrach's entry into grain farming as part of Algeria's broader national strategy aimed at reinforcing food security. According to the group, this expertise is also being mobilized for the benefit of fellow African nations.
For this year's edition of CIPSA Filaha 2026, we are noticing a clear improvement, particularly with the participation of more than 40 foreign countries, which is highly encouraging. Like other economic operators, whether industrialists or farmers, we are keen to attend such platforms in order to discover the best and latest technologies that can help improve production and to benefit from other experiences that enable us to avoid negative repercussions and achieve the objectives that have been set.
As CIPSA Filaha continues through business meetings, investment discussions and sector partnerships, the exhibition is sending a broader message about the future of African agriculture, one centered on economic integration, stronger logistics connectivity, and investment in modern agricultural technologies as African countries increasingly view food security not as a national issue alone, but as a continental strategic priority.
World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said Wednesday that there are 600 suspected Ebola cases and 139 suspected deaths in link to the virus. Speaking at a press conference in Geneva, he warned that the number of cases is likely to increase, noting that the virus had been circulating for some time before the outbreak was detected.
Beyond the confirmed cases, there are almost 600 suspected cases and 139 suspected deaths. We expect those numbers to keep increasing, given the amount of time the virus was circulating before the outbreak was detected.
This is the end of our news bulletin. See you in a moment for our special coverage on Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to China.